Hello, this is Tom Bassadilli from TBDA. You're listening to WCGO Radio 1590 and 95.9 Chicago Smart Talk. The Mike Nowak Show starts in 3, 2, 1.
Well, I've been a hunter all my life. I love animals. That's why I like to kill them. Good day, Roy.
Hank and Roy Spin are tough, fearless backwoodsmen who have chosen to live in a violent, unrelenting world of nature's creatures, where only the fittest survive. Today, they are off to hunt mosquitoes.
Mosquito's a clever little bastard. You can track him for days and days until you really get to know him like a friend. He knows you're there, and you know he's there. It's a game of wits. You hate him, then you respect him, then you kill him.
Suddenly, Hank spots the mosquito they're after. Now, more than ever, they must rely on the skills they have learned from a lifetime's hunting. Hank gauges the wind. Roy examines the mosquito's spore. Then... it's a success. The mosquito lies dead. But Roy must make sure.
There's nothing more dangerous than a wounded mosquito.
Wherever there is a challenge, Hank and Roy Spim will be there, ready to carry on the primordial struggle between man and inoffensive tiny insects.
It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. Green, gardening, and environment radio. Flavored with a dash of humor. Welcome to intelligent, irreverent talk about plants and the planet they grow on. Your questions, comments, and participation are always welcome at 877-711-5611.
Good planets are hard to find. Temperate zones and tropic climes. True currents and thriving seas. Wind blowing through breathing trees. Strong ozone and safe sunshine. Well, good planets are hard to find. Good planets are in demand.
This hour is brought to you by Bartlett Tree Experts. Every tree needs a champion. Go to bartlett.com.
Jet streams and perfect air.
And here they are, Peggy Malecki and Mike Nowak.
Well, good planets are in demand. Right.
With the single exception that I am Peggy-less this morning, it is just Mike Nowak on the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. And Peggy will join us again next week, but she ain't here right now. And I learned the lesson, my lesson, the hard way, setting up the show, because I can't believe what all the stuff that Peggy does when we set up the show. I'm not seeing the Facebook stream, guys. Are we up on there, Ellie? Because I've refreshed a bunch of times on, and so I'm just asking. I'm going to let it go, but I don't see it. So if we're there, because we were going to try a new stream today, we're trying a new trick. Andrew has got us on a different program, and it's in the middle of a thunderstorm here, and that's the other thing. I am soaked like a rat, just dragging in stuff from outside into the studio. So no Peggy, I'm wet. We're not on Facebook. What else could possibly go wrong this morning? Welcome to the show. I've got a couple of people in the studio right now. And no, I had somebody write a comment on Facebook, family reunion. No, that is not what's happening here. However, the two people in the studio are named, well, they pronounce it Nowak, which is barbaric, actually, if you ask me. Nowak. Come on. We all know it's Nowak, okay? Just,
well, historically, we were barbarians.
Yeah. And that's Tom Nowak. It's really hard for me to say that, Tom. Tom Nowak and Julie Nowak is sitting opposite him. And yes, they are related by contract, right?
Yep, exactly.
That's right, by legal contract. But they're talking about different things on the show today. And so I brought them into the studio right away because Peggy's not here, and I just need people in front of me. I need an audience. I can't perform without an audience. And Tom is here, and he's going to start the deal today, talking about, we talk gardening, the environment, we say green living. This is the green living part, where you take your money and you figure out how to use it wisely, how to put it into responsible funds and to grow it so that you're doing it sustainably. And that's why Tom's here. And we'll explain that. Tom was here several years ago when Peggy and I were still at Pirate Radio. Pirate Radio. And I got to ask you, was somebody sleeping in the hall that day when you came into the studio? I have no idea.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
I think it was a good day.
And then Julie will be here later, and she will be talking about our Congress and passing laws about climate change. Oh, thank you. That's better. Okay. We're going to turn that mic during the break. Okay. And then finally, at the end of this first hour here, you're going to like this. Jumping worms. I posted a thing about jumping worms and the threat to America, and people got really weird on me. So jumping worms is going to happen also. It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki without Peggy Malecki. If you love to landscape with trees, we have to do it this way because that mic picks up. They're really sensitive, and it's going to block you. Okay, now I'm going to make you slide this way, I think. Let's see. Advantage of 40% off for container trees and 30% off. No, go the other way. Go the other way. There's still a good supply. There we go. And now I can see. Yay. Okay. Junipers, yews, and the deciduous larches, bald cypresses, and dawn redwoods. Many of the I'm going to need music. Okay. Form or have unusual shape. Yeah. Why are we on my page? It's the Mike Nowak Show without Peggy Malecki this morning, and I'm very pleased to have in the studio with me Tom Nowak and Julie Nowak. But Julie, you just chill for a little bit. She's sitting in the Peggy slot there so that I can be reassured and not collapse into a heap here. But I want to start with Tom here. Tom is a CFP. Which I assume means Certified Financial Planner.
It does.
A founder and principal of Quantum Financial Planning, LLC, a fee-only financial planning and registered investment advisory firm. And it was funny, I was looking at my notes when you were on the show back in 2016. It was May of 2016 when we were at Pirate Radio. And I didn't even know what it meant, fee-only financial planning. And it's pretty simple. It makes sense, but perhaps you want to explain that.
Sure. Traditionally, a lot of financial service providers have been paid by commissions. So they'll get a commission that you may or may not realize that's hidden into the product that they sell.
Yeah.
A fee only is a model where you know exactly what the fee is right up front. There is no commissions. It's theoretically more objective that way. There are two types of fee only: folks that charge the 1 or 2% or 0.5% fee on your overall assets per year, and then there's people like me that just charge by the hour or a retainer based on hourly time.
Yeah,
but they're both fee only, those types.
Okay, what's the advantage of each? I would imagine that there is incentive for a broker with a when they get a cut of what you. So it behooves them to have you do well, right?
Well, is the again, I'm going to be biased on the hourly model.
Okay, because that's your model.
Because that's my model. But when you get a percentage of product that you sell, you're basically you're a carpenter with a hammer. Everything looks like a nail. So I have so many things on the shelves.
Right.
There are other things on other people's shelves I can't tell you about, otherwise I don't get paid. So there's an inherent conflict with that kind of model. My own personal problem with the assets under management model is somebody that might have $1 million is paying 1%, say 10,000 per year, whether they talk to you 15 minutes per year or 15 hours. So
that's true.
It's kind of like real estate. You pay your 6% fee, whether the house sells in 1 day or 2 years.
So once they've got you, it's like, no offense to all you lawyers out there, you make a phone call and you just got billed $120, regardless of how long the phone call is or whatever their fee is.
If it's assets under management, it's a percentage of assets, whether you use the service or not.
Yeah.
I actually more like a lawyer model where if a person uses 1 hour of my service, that's all they pay for. If they use 5 hours, that's all they pay for. So hourly fee only, more like an attorney.
Yeah. All right. Well, then I see where that makes sense.
Unless it's a contingency.
You're getting what you pay for, and that's the difference.
Exactly.
Maybe that's the way we should put it.
Exactly.
And the reason Tom's here today is because, as I said, this is a Green Living Show, and he's written a couple of books. We'll give you an idea of where he's coming from. One is called Low Fee Socially Responsible Investing, and the other is Low Fee Vegan Investing. And one of the things you explained to me 3 years ago, and this is how often we meet, is that vegan investing actually sort of fits very neatly into my life. And to a lot of people who are looking for responsible investing, they would think, oh, no, that sounds really fringy. But actually, vegan investing is not fringy at all, is it?
Well, surprisingly, some interesting things have happened in the last 3.5 years.
Oh, wow.
Yes,
okay, so I'm getting, am I paying for this right now? That's
yeah. It's a loophole that you have to get free advice and give your audiences free advice.
For all of you out there,
general.
Get yourself a radio show and then invite the financial guy on. Okay.
Exactly. But if you don't mind, let me explain a couple of things that happened that you'll be particularly interested in.
Sure, let's go for it.
Okay. When I was on the show 3.5 years ago,
yeah,
you also had somebody else on the show from Ethos Investing.
Yes, we did.
And they have an exchange-traded fund. It's kind of like a mutual fund, a basket of stocks. And it's a sustainable group of stocks. It addresses things like climate change and a lot of the 7 deadly sins out there and stuff like that. So it's a very interesting fund. There are a whole bunch of other funds. Full disclosure or a disclaimer, I'm not saying, buy this or anything like that. I'm just saying in general.
Can we say that in general right now? Anything that Tom says here is not financial advice. It's just his accumulated wisdom.
There we go. Yeah. And so what's interesting, and there are a whole bunch of great players out there, but Etho, I took a look this morning to see how Etho as a fund has been doing in the last 3.5 years.
All right.
Okay. And people will say sustainable investing, I'm going to lose money because all these goody two-shoes.
Because all the money's in oil, as we know, right?
Well, it's not in oil, and oil's going to make a lot of money, right? But it doesn't. So Etho.
Wait. You're saying. That sounded contradictory.
Oil stocks haven't been doing well lately. For the last 3 years or so, not so well.
Okay.
Not so well. Because people have been divesting away from oil.
Yeah.
And oil usage is slightly going down, from what their projections were, how they were priced in. So they're not doing that well. Now, could they come back? I hope not, because that means climate change is going to be a problem.
I hope not either.
Otherwise, we won't be here to talk about it.
No.
But Etho, just to give you an example, 3.5 years ago, if you look at the S&P 500, which is a benchmark that all financial people use as a kind of a touchstone, is up 38% from 3.5 years ago. Now the market's been flat for the last year and a half, but from 3.5 years ago,
you wouldn't know that from what comes out of Washington, that the market has been flat for the last year and a half.
No.
You would say
you only
greatest
get a good
economy
base.
ever is
Yes,
what you're hearing. Okay?
Exactly.
All right.
So over the last 3.5 years, the index is 38% up. Now, what has Etho done since that time?
Yeah.
53%. So had you been listening to the broadcast, talked to your financial advisor, done the research, and bought that instead of the S&P 500, you'd be 53% up instead of 38% up. So it's an example, just not so random because we talked about it on the show, of what the power of sustainable investing can be if your worldview matches what happens in reality. If your worldview is a little early or doesn't match what happens in reality, well, then you could underperform the index. So it's really, you're putting your money where your mouth is, basically. If you think that this is where the world is going, that's one way to do it. And now, you mentioned vegan investing. 3.5 years ago, it was shortly after I wrote the book, and I said there's no way to really easily exclude meat and dairy from your portfolio if you were a vegan or a vegetarian that wanted to, or just somebody that felt the world was going that way because of all the CSAs out there and all the green mics out there, encouraging people.
There's only one, okay, as far as I know.
Okay,
all right, just letting you know.
Okay, well, there's a exchange-traded fund in, September 9th is going to be launched, VEGN. It's a vegan index fund, climate vegan index. So if you want to divest from fossil fuels as well as meat, dairy, animal rights type situations and what have you, there's going to be an exchange-traded fund launched. It was supposed to be launched earlier this year, got delayed. So basically, it allows folks with a worldview in that arena to say, hey, I like that too. So a person could look at a whole bunch of things out there. Vanguard has a relative.
All right, when you say, okay, let's stop there, though.
Yeah,
People can look at a whole bunch of things, and I will let folks know that you gave me some websites for them to look at, which I have put on my blog. You go to MikeNowak.net, MikeNowak.net. You might pronounce it MikeNowak.net. It's possible. And you'll see these links to various mutual funds. There's an organization called the U.S. Social Investment Forum, and you gave me a document from that which I also put up on the blog. Tell me about the importance of the U.S. Social Investment Forum.
Okay, they've been around for a number of years, and folks like your audience can look up on their website different mutual funds that have different flavors of sustainable investing, different themes that might align with their worldview. So they'll give you the ticker symbols of those funds. They'll give you the performance of those funds. They'll give you the what those funds screen for, so you can see that, okay, you might be okay with alcohol, I might not be, and so I want to screen out alcohol.
So you can get you can do it that finely.
You can find a
because
fund,
I remember back in the day when 20 years ago or whatever, and trying to invest, and people go, well, you really don't know what's in the mutual fund. You just got to accept what's there. Has that changed?
There's always going to be an achievement towards perfection. You have to let good, not or perfect, not be the enemy of the good. There's always going to be, any fund that you have that has more than one holding is going to possibly have something that's going to disappoint you on a given day. So you have to have a little bit of flexibility. But on the most part, things have gotten better and better.
Purity is not necessarily going to help you in this case.
If you get basically, if it's an all or nothing approach, and you'll say, well, I'll just stick with all kinds of garbage and stuff like that, I'm okay with that because it's not perfect, then yeah, sustainable investing isn't for you. If it's kind of like, well, I want to do the best I can, and I'm willing to be a little flexible, then it could be very, very helpful for you.
All right, by the way, that's Tom Nowak. Yes, it's spelled Nowak. He is the founder and principal of Quantum Financial Planning, LLC. I've got that link on my website as well, but it is quantumfinancialplanning.com. That's how easy that is. All right, so what do you say to people who look at this and say it's so... I mean, look, let's put it this way. Investing is not for sissies, really, in a certain way, because it's complex. Even now that you have more choices, that actually creates more problems because you have more choices. It's harder to make a decision than it used to be. And I imagine there's some people who say, oh, yeah, that fund, that's for greenies, and it's not going to make any money for you. I mean, are we still getting that sort of advice out there? And how do you wade through all the options you have?
Okay. Well, as you may know from our last show, my first career was a scientist.
Yes, I meant to. I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, you were a scientist, and so is Julie's, right?
Exactly.
You guys, I get a feeling this is where somebody might have met. So
yes, exactly. So we're both scientists, and what I say is investing isn't rocket science. Julie and I know what that might look like, and it's not that. So it's not rocket science. I think the industry at large wants to make you think, and everybody think it is rocket science, so it justifies higher fees and stuff like this. But it could be as simple as watching paint dry,
and is interesting.
So you can pick something that is low cost, well diversified. Gone fishing portfolio. The previous show was a fishing show. So there's still people hanging on. The fishermen.
We're going to actually talk about fishing in the next segment too. When we talk jumping worms,
exactly.
Believe me, there's fishing. It's connected to it.
It'll be fishy.
Where's my digger? Okay,
ding.
It's out. It's in Peggy. Oh, Peggy's not here. Peggy, okay. Get the diggers.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So here's the thing. You mentioned a point about the complexity. It doesn't have to be, with a little bit of guidance, folks can find something that really kind of rhymes with their worldview, something that they can set and forget.
And they've got numbers to say, here's the performance over the past 5 years, the past 10 years.
I'm glad you reminded me, because almost everybody can go to yahoo.com finance, find that site and plug in.
Well, I've got that linked also. You gave that to me as well.
You plug in the ticker symbol of the investment that you're looking at, and then you can.
But what if you don't know the ticker symbol and you don't know what you're looking for?
Yeah, then you probably maybe need a few minutes of financial advice, or if,
okay.
Because
like from Quantum, right?
Yes, because it kind of like
ding.
Yeah, it'd be kind of like me. It says, Tom, why don't you run the show today? I was going to say, what are all these buttons you're looking at there? It wouldn't be good for me to run the show today. We need an engineer and yourself, that type of thing. So sometimes you do need a little bit of guidance. Does that mean you can't?
Well, that's why you're here. No, and that's the important thing, is that you have somebody like you to say, there is a better way to do this, a more sustainable way.
And there are books out there. There's websites. That's why that USCIF website's a really good handy place to start. There's another site there that talks about these exchange traded funds, like the ETHO, like what's going to be the vegan one. There's a Vanguard exchange traded fund that launched not that long ago, ESGV. That's a very broad-based fund.
Explain what ESGV is.
Okay. ESGV is the ticker symbol, of course, but Vanguard very cleverly chose the name because ESG is environmental social governance. V for Vanguard. So environmental social governance is probably the most commonly used term now for sustainable investing, because it's the broader tent, and it's where most of the big banks are going. When we met a few years ago, $1 out of $5 was screened for ESG, environmental social governance. Now it's 1 out of 4. When we meet next time, it'll be 1 out of 3. So it's a huge momentum.
And someday it needs to be 1 out of 1.
It's going there. It's going mainstream.
All right, that's Tom Nowak again. He's from Quantum Financial Planning LLC. The link is on my website. You can go to quantumfinancialplanning.com. When we come back, we'll just wrap this up, and then we get right into Jumping Worms. It's an odd show today. It's the Mike Nowak Show without Peggy Malecki, and I got to get my dingers. I'll be right back.
City Grange, Chicago's newest and most unique garden center, wants to remove all barriers to your gardening success. How? By providing organic heirloom plants for your kitchen garden, pollinator-friendly natives and annuals, container planting to go. They deliver the plants, you put them in. Who does that? Classes for adults and kids, special events, and more. They even have complimentary valet parking on weekends. 5500 Northwestern Avenue at Catalpa. CityGrange.com. Learn, shop, blossom.
Streets Alive, Evanston's free annual open streets event is coming to Main Street in Evanston on September 10th from 1 to 5 p.m. Streets Alive features a climbing wall, yoga,
tell me, I wanted to wrap up with you when we come back. Is there anything that we missed that you'd like to get out?
It also includes Evanston Green Living
let's see.
Festival for folks looking for products, services, and ideas that
Let's talk about the Morningstar a little bit. Morningstar, you know, because there's a link to Morningstar ratings.
Yes.
Then a lot of people might relate to Morningstar ratings.
Yes, they're familiar with
This
that.
is Peggy.
Okay.
When I speak at local events, people often ask me, aren't you the Peggy in Natural Awakenings ads? And that makes me happy because it reminds me that Chicagoans want to lead healthier lives. And Natural Awakenings magazine helps them do just that. Natural Awakenings is the greenest, healthiest magazine in the Chicago area. Each month, we bring you the
All
latest
right.
information about health and wellness, complementary medicine, fitness and exercise, raising healthy kids, and even keeping your pets healthy. You'll find articles about healthy homes, too, including gardening, energy efficiency, and green living. And if you love good food, you'll always find tasty recipes and healthy cooking hints. And check out our monthly calendar. It's full of events to keep you connected. Natural Awakenings is available in more than 1,100 locations throughout the city, as well as suburban Cook, Lake, and McHenry counties. And it's free. Or visit us at nachicago.com. Natural Awakenings. Feel good, live simply, laugh more.
Meat and dairy might taste good to you. You think they're part of a balanced, healthy diet. Well, there are several things that you ought to know that the industry tries to keep quiet. They're full of hormones, poisons, antibiotics too. Deadly bacteria, it's just a toxic stew. Can lead to heart disease, bone loss, cancer too. So viva Las Vegas! Viva Las Vegas!
All right, that's Eco Elvis, and I was looking. He doesn't have anything on financial planning, so the closest I could get to was good. Viva Las Vegans,
very good.
in honor of your book, low fee vegan in. Whoa, I got to turn that off. They've got my computer on. Low fee vegan investing. Tom Nowak has also written low fee socially responsible investing. The links are there on my website. By the way, I went out and got. All right, the dingers are here now. And we're on Facebook on the Mike Nowak Show. Are we on Periscope as well there, Andrew?
Yeah, so we're on Mike Nowak, which is Twitter, and also Periscope. So
we're on, so you can go to, I don't know how many of you listening are even on Twitter or even know about the video streaming on Twitter. It's called Periscope. You can download the app. We are streaming live on there. And next week we're adding YouTube, right, Andrew?
yes, it will be activated hopefully within 24 hours.
It'll be activated within 24 hours once we pass the background check. Right,
Exactly.
okay. I'm not sure I'm going to pass the background check. Anyway, welcome back to the show. Without Becky Malecki today, and with thunderstorms outside, and with Tom Nowak in the studio here. Before I let you go, you wanted to bring up something else that folks might be interested when they're thinking about. And do you use the terms interchangeably when I say responsible investing and sustainable investing? Is that the same thing, really?
In most cases, it's just easier to use a term that's familiar with folks. There are nuances with any trade where you can slice and dice a little finer, and they do have finer definitions and stuff like that. But there's a whole bunch of terms.
But you can tweak it a little bit.
You can tweak it.
You wanted to talk about Morningstar before we get to Jumping Worms here on the Mike Nowak Show.
Yes, I just wanted one other reference that's just out there for most folks is Morningstar.com. You know, a lot of folks that do any investing, tracking, and stuff like that are familiar with the Morningstar 5-star rating, 4-star ratings, 3-star ratings for mutual funds and stocks, things like that. And that's based on history. And then there's the Morningstar Gold, Silver, Bronze ratings. That's based on the quality of the management of the fine advisors. Well, Morningstar, since we met last, has added a couple years ago Globe ratings, and these are sustainable investing ESG type screens.
Okay.
So it's really more data. So to your point about when are we going to be 100% ESG,
right?
Morningstar is kind of a bellwether to show that that's really becoming mainstream when you got Morningstar putting a lot of resources into evaluating companies and rating them based on their environmental, social, and governance factors. So the change is happening really accelerating because it's simply just extra good data to have on a company, whether it's more risky than a company that is one's more risky, one's less risky. So it's just knowing whether they have an environmental problem, governance problem, social conscious problem that's going to come back and bite them.
All right, one more question, and then we'll get to Chris Evans. No, not that Chris Evans, the other Chris Evans. With the stock market being, well, you said the last year and a half it's been basically flat. But within that time, it goes up 400, it goes down 800, which happened just this week. Or actually, it went down 800 and then came up 400.
Yeah.
Or what about that volatility? Is that something people should be paying attention to?
Is they should be aware that stocks are volatile. It's a good reminder that you get risk-reward type of situation, and that stocks are really for the long term. If it's money that's 8, 9, 10 years is going to be spent then. If it's going to be spent for college 2 years from now, shouldn't be in the stock market. So it's a reminder of that, and how it relates to sustainability is a lot of folks, if they're investing according to their worldview, they're more likely to hold a fund longer through thick and thin if it agrees with their worldview. So it's a good way to maintain that discipline because there is going to be that volatility. That it's really equities for the long term, not the short term.
Keep that in mind when we come to the end of the world in about 10 years, So do your investing for 10 years, just about the time the world ends, and then cash out, and then you'll at least have some cash there, right?
Well, if you put capital into the green things, you may push that date out.
And that's the point, actually. That is, I say that thing tongue in cheek about the end of the world, but the point is, maybe if you don't invest in the things that are causing climate change, that are leading to climate change, perhaps you as an investor, talk about a win-win situation.
Exactly.
You're making money and saving the planet at the same time. That's a powerful. Really good deal.
Powerful.
Yeah, it's very powerful. Tom Nowak, thank you very much again. Go to quantumfinancialplanning.com. All right, it's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. In just 60 seconds, we will get to Chris Evans and the story of jumping worms. First, got a minute for your trees? Bartlett Tree Experts wants to tell you about tree topping. And no, I don't mean sprinkles. That's not the tree topping I'm talking about. I mean when the main trunk or all of the ends of branches on a tree are cut straight off the top. That's tree topping. While people sometimes do this to reduce the overall height of a tree, not a great idea. The practice of tree topping is never recommended. Okay, folks, don't do that. Why? Topping promotes decay, creates wounds that serve as an entry point for insects and disease. It produces rapid growth of water sprouts. The water sprouts, or suckers sometimes we call them, and smaller remaining limbs are structurally insecure and greatly increase the likelihood of limb breakage and tree failure. Finally, topping removes a large portion of the tree's leaves. This decreases the tree's ability to produce energy through photosynthesis, weakening its vigor and starving the tree. And I'll add one of my own. It's ugly. Just saying. The best way to avoid topping is to select the right tree in the right place, which is not as... It can be difficult, actually, if you're not paying attention to the full-grown size and height of the species in a few years. And then you need to prune it properly from a young age. Let the Bartlett Tree Experts help you with your pruning needs, because every tree needs a champion. Go to bartlett.com. And with that, we go to a guy who is a forester himself, and that is Chris Evans from the University of Illinois Extension. How are you, Chris?
Oh, I'm fine. How are you doing, Mike?
I'm fine. Now, do you prefer Chris or Christopher?
Oh, Chris is fine.
Chris, okay. And you're Illinois Extension Forestry and Research Specialist in the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Sciences. And so obviously you know a lot about trees yourself, and you've probably seen your share of topped trees.
Unfortunately, yes. I think it's a plague on the landscape down here.
I don't know why people do that. For the life of me, I think they get some idea that, well, I'll just cut it off and then it's too high, and they didn't think about what they were planting in the first place. And Well, we can get into that, but the problem is today we are talking jumping worms because there was an article in the Chicago Tribune this past week, and I posted it on Facebook, and I got the weirdest responses, Chris, about it. Everything from, oh my goodness, what's going on, to, hey, we can use that for fishing, to, everybody knows about this already. What's the big deal? It was all over the map, Chris. Is that what you're getting as well?
Yeah, I think it's hard for people to think about earthworms as being damaging, where, they've heard all for their whole life that you want to add more earthworms or their benefits. So you get a lot of weird reactions.
All right, so let's go back to we'll do a couple of minutes here, and then we'll break, and then we'll come back and finish it. But there is a species out there that is commonly known as jumping worms, and they're the, how do you pronounce it? Amynthus? Is that the genus or the species?
Yep, that's right.
Amynthus. Amynthas. And they came from Asia. Why do all the bad things come from Asia when it comes to our gardens, Chris? I'm really trying to figure that out. So jumping worms, you guys, Wisconsin noticed them in 2013. I guess Illinois noticed them in 2015 in the state. Is that right?
Yeah, so Wisconsin found them first and then really started publicizing and getting information out. And it was so close to Illinois, we decided that it was something we wanted to start looking for, just to see where it was, or even if we had it in the state.
Mm-hmm. And we do, believe me. And one of the things that was pointed out in the story, and you can go to my website, MikeNovak.net. There's a bulletin that Illinois Extension put out that you are the co-author of about these jumping worms. When I see them, and believe me, the photo on my blog today is a photo I took a couple of days ago in my backyard, and you confirmed it. You said, yep, you've got jumping worms. And they're in my backyard. So if they're in my backyard, they're pretty much in everybody's backyard in Chicago, or a lot of backyards. Or maybe because I do a lot of planting, it's quite possible that I'm getting them first because I bring in a lot of different plant material. That might be the case, right, Chris?
It really might be. What we found is I think they get shared around accidentally, either with people moving mulch or compost, or even plant material. You don't have to actually move the worm. Their little cocoons, their little egg sacs are microscopic, so they can even be, hanging on roots of plants.
Wait, you're saying the egg sacs are microscopic?
Almost. They're very small, and so you really can't detect them in the soil, so you don't have to move an actual worm to move jumping worms. They can be kind of undetectable in soil or mulch. So
right.
People move them around without even knowing it, yeah.
Right, and that's the point you make in your articles and other articles, is that you might not have worms in a pot or on a tool, but you might have the eggs, and it's really easy to move them, and the eggs survive the winter. The worms do not. They die when it gets too cold. But the eggs survive, and then you have a generation in the spring. Well, actually, not the spring. They don't even hatch until about June. Isn't that right, Chris?
Well, they hatch a little earlier, but typically what we've seen is their population builds up enough that you start seeing them about June. And
okay.
One of the interesting things we're finding is they actually live the winter in southern Illinois, but not northern Illinois.
Uh-oh. All right, I've got a question about that too, and I've got some others. That's I've got so many questions about this. That's Chris Evans. He's a Illinois Extension Forestry and Research Specialist, and we'll be talking more about jumping worms when we come back. It's the Mike Nowak Show without Peggy Malecki. This is Mike Nowak. If you're a sustainable business and you're not... Okay, Chris, we'll be back in 2 minutes.
Okay, great.
It's McHenry County's largest.
Is it still? Okay, well, you can...
One of the best green events in the area. These folks get it.
Yeah, you can kill their mics now for this segment. Yeah.
With your help as
All right. Although I know you guys are gardeners,
Yeah.
so
I was wondering what was going on, you know.
it's just sort of a hollow sound that sometimes happens here, and it's because of the way.
That can be related or not related to climate change. And then you separate
Wow.
that from the climate
Okay.
science and the social policy. So it's almost like teaching three classes. The meteorology, which is short term, the climate, which is long term.
Yeah, there's
and the
still,
policy, which
there's
is
still
government,
issues
whether or
here.
not it's federal, state, or local.
There's gotta be.
Meteorologist Rick
I mean,
DiMaio.
yeah,
Stick
I don't know.
around for some more insight.
All right, I
on
know what
weather
to
and
play. We gotta
climate
play
on
it.
WCGO 1590, Chicago's.
All righty.
Are you looking for a new ride? Ready to leave gas stations in the dust and speed away down the highway? 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds? Well, here's your chance. The Illinois Solar Energy Association is raffling off a 2019 Tesla Model X, the award-winning all-electric SUV. But you need to get your tickets soon because only 2,500 will be sold. So how do you win? Go to store.illinoissolar.org. That's store.illinoissolar.org. Buy one raffle ticket for $100 or the 4-pack for $300. All raffle proceeds will fully benefit the Illinois Solar Energy Association, a nonprofit working to advance solar energy development throughout the state of Illinois. The winner will be drawn at the ISEA member meeting on December 5th, 2019. Anyone in the continental U.S. is eligible to win, and you don't even need to be present at the drawing to claim your prize. So get your tickets, the rules, and all the other small print details at illinoissolar.org today.
Chicago Smart Talk, AM 1590 and FM 95.9, the exclusive home for the Dave Ramsey Show in Chicago.
Just so you know, this is the sound of jumping worms in your soil and in your backyard. This is what happens when they get in there. And then you go inside because you can't deal with them anymore. It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki, usually not with Peggy Malecki today. And we are talking to Chris Evans from the University of Illinois Extension. We're talking jumping worms. And where did we leave off? Because I remember you were saying something that had me thinking it was about overwintering and the eggs. I know, getting back to why jumping worms are a problem. It's not just the fact, we haven't even talked about how they jump. I call them writhing worms, Chris, because I've not actually seen them jump, although some people say they do. But if you touch them, they go nuts. They just start writhing like crazy, or if you disturb them. And that's kind of the key for you knowing if you have them in your backyard. What's the difference between jumping worms and traditional earthworms, knowing, and I will explain, as you said earlier, earthworms are not native either. Earthworms were not here because they got wiped out by the Ice Age. And so the earthworms that we had here that we think of as our friends and people love in their gardens, they're not native either. So this is just another invasive population, isn't it, Chris?
That's right. Most of the earthworms that we have, being familiar with, those are actually European earthworms. And these jumping worms are a little different. And the reason we're more worried about them, one is that they tend to concentrate all of their feeding in that topmost layer. So they're in the top 4 inches or so of soil, and they live at population densities sometimes up to 10 times more dense than the other earthworms.
Wow.
And so they just because there's so many of them and they're concentrated out at the top, they just plow through the organic matter in the soil really fast.
And as I noted in one of the articles, the earthworms that we're used to go up and down through the soil vertically, and whereas the jumping worms kind of stay at the top, and that allows them to cause more damage to to the leaf litter, to the duff in forests, and to the mulch in our gardens, right, Chris?
Right. Yeah. So that top layer is where, as you know, most of the organic matter sits anyways. That's where the root zone for most of our plants are, and so they cycle through that organic matter very quick, break it down super quick. And there's some interesting research out there. They're showing that a population of these jumping worms can reduce the forest litter, so the forest floor litter, the leaves and the detritus, by over 80%. I mean, they just eat through that, all that kind of bank of nutrients that we normally have.
All right. I had somebody write when I posted this, they said, what's the problem? They're worms. They poop out the good stuff. They poop, they poop out organic matter that things grow in. So what's the story with that, Chris?
So that's true. So what we've found is when they feed through and they eat the organic matter, they do release a lot of nutrients very quickly. And so as they get in there, you actually get a flush of fertility, a flush of nutrients. But the form that nutrient is changed to is very mobile. So you actually get a lot of leaching following that. So you get a pulse of a lot of nutrients and then followed by a loss of nutrients in the soil very quickly. So basically they're eating through that bank of fertility, that bank of nutrients, organic matter that a soil typically slowly releases over time. Instead, they pulse it all at once, and then it's gone. There's no more in reserves.
When you say they pulse it, in what form and how is it? Why does it disappear so quickly?
Well, by breaking it down and changing it right away, it goes into the nitrogen is in a more mobile form that can be leached through water. So again, it makes a lot of nutrients available very fast. But then since it's not tied up in that kind of partially decomposed organic matter, it moves out through leaching.
Okay. What's the difference then if I'm composting in my yard, I'm going to find red wigglers in there. I will find earthworms in there as well. I'll find all kinds of different critters, insects and other animals in the compost pile. I say bugs, and I mean that as in a big picture, bugs meaning insects and non-insects and arachnids and crawling things and pill bugs and centipedes and millipedes and all of that. Okay, so if I've got red wigglers in my compost, what kind of, are they causing any problem in my yard too? And what happens if the jumping worms want to get into my compost pile, or will they get into the compost pile? Are they interested in that at all?
Oh, they are, definitely. And, the principles, the processes is the same. Basically, the red wigglers, the jumping worms, they're all eating the organic matter and then casting off their worm castings. The problem is the scale. So jumping worms could certainly get into compost, and they would, again, since there's such higher population densities, they're bigger worms, they feed more. It's just the scale of turning that into kind of processing that mulch is a lot quicker. And you talk to a lot of gardeners, and they say they have a hard time keeping mulch on top of some of their beds because the worms just cycle through it so quickly.
When they say that, they're not talking about wood chips, are they? I assume they're talking about compost as mulch.
Right. Yes, compost as mulch. They won't necessarily eat wood chips and things, but they will eat. As those wood chips break down, they would definitely eat them then.
Yeah,
sure,
because
compost.
But I think that's misleading, and I'm not saying you were misleading. I read that too, and I thought, no, come on. If they put wood chips down, that's not going to disappear overnight because of jumping worms. It's a lot of people like me, and I do this sometimes too. I use compost as a mulch, but that will disappear very quickly.
Right. Yes, you're correct.
Okay. One of the guys who read the article I posted said, hey, this is great. This is going to be great for fishing. I don't see the problem. Would you like to address that, Chris?
Oh, sure, absolutely. And they might be a good fish bait. I mean, they are definitely active. But, one of the things, and in my role as an extension forester and a researcher, I'm very concerned about is these worms kind of establishing populations in natural lands and natural forests. And so fishing, releasing worms accidentally, dumping your bait, these kind of things can move these worms around, especially into natural systems, where we do have a lot of indications that they're very damaging in our forest. So that's the primary thing I'm concerned about people using these worms, would be introducing them accidentally, spreading them into our natural ecosystems here in Illinois.
Yeah, and fishermen have already, anglers, to be non-gender specific here, have already done that with earthworms, haven't they, Chris?
Yeah, recreationists in general have moved things around. Sure. So earthworms, European earthworms, a lot of other species. It's a common thing, unfortunately.
All right, give me. You got like 40 seconds here. What do you advise people to do if they find these in their yard?
Well, unfortunately, they're hard to get rid of. So the big thing we recommend people is to not move stuff around. Don't move mulch. Don't move compost. Don't share plants with other people. Try to contain them, and so we can kind of limit their spread throughout Illinois.
And that, as you know, is very difficult. I was thinking about that myself, Chris, and all the stuff I move and plants I give to people, and I'm thinking, wow, I don't know how I can do that. So I'm going to continue to study this, and I hope you keep in touch with us, too. I'd love to talk about this more. Chris Evans from the University of Illinois, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoyed it.
All right. The Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki.
Show with Peggy Malecki. This hour is brought to you by Bartlett Tree Experts. Every tree needs a champion. Go to bartlett.com. Here they are again, Peggy Malecki and Mike Nowak.
All I need is good food to eat and make me healthy, wealthy, wide awake. Lettuce, tomatoes, root and bacon. What about those sweet potatoes? All I need is good food to eat. All I need is good food to eat. All I need is good food.
Welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show. Sometimes with Peggy Malecki and sometimes without. Mostly with. Not today. Kind of a stormy day. Before I left the house today, I watched my cat crawl under the couch. She doesn't like it very much. Kathleen, I'm hoping your computer has hooked up as well. So, there were all kinds of issues as I ran out the door, and then I came here and got soaked just coming into the studio. It's been a lot of fun already. However, I've got a couple of great guests here, and we're going to get back to the other half of the Nowak team after the break. But before we do, I wanted to do a shout-out to I'm looking up, and I can see Ellie playing with our logos there. I see the Faith and Place logo, and we're happy to be a sponsor for Faith and Place, and they've got some great stuff coming up. They've got their event coming up at the Field Museum. In fact, let me see if normally I would be here and I would say, Peggy, look that up real quick while I'm tap dancing here, but she's not here. But they have a Green Team Summit on Saturday, September 14th, and Peggy and I are going to be at the Green Team Summit on the 14th of September, and they're just getting a bunch of people together at the Field Museum, and I guess hundreds of folks. So you're nodding. Let's get Julie's mic on it. You know about this then?
Yes, I attended their first one down at the Field Museum a few years ago when they had their keynote address by Mark Charles, and it was quite well attended then, and I believe it's grown since then.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a really big deal. So Peggy and I said, yeah, let's get on board and let's be part of this. So it's a lot of great things coming out. In fact, they sponsored yesterday, which is where I was going with this conversation, a Monarch Festival on the south side of Chicago at the South Shore Cultural Center, and I went down there almost on a whim because I had read a newsletter that I got from Friends of the Parks, and we've been following a lot of the issues of Friends of the Parks, and there's a couple of issues, and one of them is the Obama Presidential Center in Jackson Park, and somehow related to that, and this is the interesting point, And I think it's time to get some folks on the show, and I think we're going to do that. The interesting thing is that proposed golf course, PGA quality golf course on the south side of Chicago, which is supposed to take the current Jackson Park golf course and the current South Shore golf course and combine them to create a PGA quality course. Unfortunately, and Tiger Woods is behind this somehow, and it keeps being linked to the Obama Presidential Center, the OPC, in Jackson Park. For those of you who listen to my show, you'll know that I'm not a fan. I'm perfectly happy for the center. I think that's great. Not where it is. I'm not a fan of it being in Jackson Park. I view it as a land grab. You can argue with me all you want. This is the way I look at it. This is an area that's already beautiful. Why not take an area that's less beautiful and convert it and transform it? You have the power to do that. You've got the money, but no, everybody wants, the nice stuff already. And that's the way money works. And money also works in terms of golf courses. And the idea of taking a golf course, and I'm a duffer myself. I do love to play golf. So you can't come at me and say, well, you hate golf courses. No way. Quite au contraire, let me say. And I've played Jackson Park, and I've played South Shore. And the great thing about those two courses is they're affordable. And folks from the neighborhood can walk over and get on the course and play. And you replace it with something that's going to cost $150 to get on, and I don't know what they're going to charge for it. But if it's a PGA quality course, it's going to be a lot of money, and you're just going to exclude all the people in that neighborhood. And you're going to take out a natural preserve, which is one of the reasons I went down there, and I did a video yesterday at the South Shore Nature Preserve, the South Shore Nature Sanctuary. Walked around, took some photos, did a video. You can go to the Mike Nowak Show on Facebook. I did an interview with a friend of mine, Mila Kellen Marshall, sometimes called MK Marshall. Carolyn Marsh was there. She's one of the people who helped create this area, the sanctuary. And the sanctuary is would be one of the casualties of this golf course. So I'm not a fan of that either. So it's and people say, well, how are they two connected, the Obama Library and the golf course? And I say, I don't know. I just know they are in a back room with smoke and cigars. Okay, that's how they're connected. That's how these things work. The money is connecting them. And they're not apparently formally connected, but if they're not connected in some way, I would be really surprised. So at any rate, that's going to be a fight as well. I think the Obama fight with the Presidential Center is over. Now it's can you save the sanctuary, the bird and butterfly sanctuary at South Shore? That's going to be the next question. Maybe there'll be one small victory here. Maybe it'll be like Montrose Beach and the piping plovers. All right. Well, guess what? We're talking climate change when we come back. It's the Mike Nowak Show. Lucky.
That's not just a tree in your yard, it's an investment.
Itchy trigger finger?
It's a natural work of art. It's part of the family, which is why you want Bartlett tree experts to care for your tree.
That was my rant. My rant of the day. Well, those are the things that make me nuts,
Are backed by the science of the Bartlett Research Laboratories. Call for a free estimate because every tree needs a champion. Go to bartlett.com.
Stay in touch with The Mike Nowak Show. Find us on Facebook at The Mike Nowak Show. Use the Twitter handle at Mike Now. Send us a photo on Instagram at The Mike Nowak Show or write to us, Mike at MikeNowak.net. We're also at TheGreenDivas.com and on the Gab Radio Network. Podcasts and blog posts are
you heard him in concert?
Yeah, he was, how at the national parks in the evenings they'll do evening programs.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, so they combined his music with, and he was there live playing with a slideshow about the park and the glaciers in the park.
Cool.
Yeah.
Glacier National Park, did
Yep.
you say?
Yep.
Yeah.
Because he's from that area.
Get there while the glaciers are still there. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the...
We just lost a glacier in Iceland. And they're putting up a plaque and say, there was a glacier.
Yeah.
There was once here a glacier.
Now, that was one of the signposts on my way to deciding to focus on climate change.
Good for you. Well, let's talk about that decision and how you do that. All right.
Many of the cultivars are dwarf in form or have unusual shapes, such as weeping, mounding, columnar, or angular. Like I said, these are not your grandfather's conifers. If you've been to the Shedd Aquarium, the Lincoln Park Conservatory, or the Chicago Botanic Garden, you've seen some of these fantastic trees. Go to Rich's Foxwillow Pines for more information. Follow them on Facebook and sign up for the e-newsletter.
Hey, it's JT and Leanne. Join us for the Heart and Home Radio Show, brought to you by Exit Realty.
Sundays at 11 on Smart Talk, WCGO, AM and FM.
Conspicuous, ridiculous, conspicuous consumption. Conspicuous, ridiculous, conspicuous consumption.
If you didn't hear what he's saying, it's conspicuous, ridiculous, conspicuous consumption. And that is a guy named Jack Gladstone. His album is Native Anthropology. And I just dug that up because our next guest said, oh, you got to find that. And that is Julie Nowak sitting in the studio here. And Tom's even here sitting opposite. He might jump in from time to time. We don't know if he's moved. And if he's not, he'll nod off and do whatever he needs to do over there. But Julie is a leader of the Citizens Climate Lobby. I've been meaning to get the Citizens Climate Lobby on the show for a long time, mainly because of you, but I've run into your colleagues at various events, and I always say, do you know Julie in the Lake County chapter? And you co-founded the Lake County chapter?
Yeah, Tom and I co-founded it with Jim Thrall from Antioch back in 2014. Now, not the whole organization, just our chapter.
Right. No. I know. Citizens Climate Lobby is a nationwide. There's 400 different chapters, or more than 400 across the country. And tell me what the Citizens Climate Lobby does. I have a rough idea just by the name, but why don't you tell me?
Sure. Citizens Climate Lobby is a group of volunteers that works to, in shorthand, build political will for a livable world.
And by the way, good luck with that.
We're making progress, slowly but surely, but, certainly focused on climate change. That is our laser focus issue. And we're trying to work with Congress. We have been working with Congress. The organization was founded in 2007 by a person who had worked on alleviating starvation in another citizen-driven organization called Results. And he took the model and brought it into working on climate change. This person was Marshall Saunders. He was actually trained by Al Gore after the Inconvenient Truth, and he had done several presentations along that line and realized after he saw a headline where Congress had approved a tremendous amount of money to go for fossil fuels that he needed to do something more effective than convincing people to change light bulbs and ride bikes. So he brought that model into the climate change effort. And so what they do is they train normal citizens like me and Tom and hundreds of thousands of others now how to work with Congress effectively to try to move them in the direction we want them to move. And we advocate specifically for a certain kind of climate change solution based on carbon fee and dividend, where you put a price on carbon at the source and then the government, instead of keeping the revenues, actually distributes them back out as monthly dividends to every household in America.
Yeah, I've been reading about that since I knew you were going to be on the show, and it's something I have a hard time wrapping my head around, and not because of the concept of it, but the idea that you can get anybody to buy into it, certainly in Congress. One of the things you point out is that you don't even like politics.
Nope. Not the traditional sense of politics. Actually, as a scientist, I had spent most of my life, sticking my fingers in my ears going, I'm a scientist, I don't do politics. And then,
but that's actually a really good point about scientists. It's one of the things I love about scientists, and it's one of the things I like about bringing science up on the show, is that it's the job of a scientist to look at the numbers, to look at the data, and not bring in outside undue influence into what they decide. And a good scientist will do that. And unfortunately, we're getting away from that in this administration, where there's pressure being applied to science. And a lot of scientists are just saying, well, I'm not going to deal with it, I'm out of here, and they're quitting.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to be talking about next week the USDA. We're going to have somebody from the Union of Concerned Scientists and talk about the resignations at the USDA because of the policy, the decision to move it to Kansas City, the USDA science offices, and of course that was done so the scientists would quit. And one of the administration honchos said that out loud, and and it makes people crazy.
Yeah.
Probably more than anything, must make scientists crazy.
Certainly, and I was involved with this March for Science in Chicago, and then last year their Science Convention, and, there are tremendous numbers of scientifically trained people who are very frustrated by walking away from science and basing, policy decisions on good science. But one of the key things I want to mention in terms of, the science-politics connection and what actually got me involved was having attended a conference where somebody mentioned that, they asked the small number of attendees, what is politics? And of course, we're all throwing out the typical, awful stuff, influence, cigars in the back room and all that kind of stuff. And then he asked somebody else who the facilitator must have known was involved, and the person said it's setting policy. And that really struck me, is, we have the common use of the term politics.
Right.
It's very, very negative.
Right. Politics is
it's partisan, actually.
It's a pejorative,
right.
Is what it is.
Right, yeah. And certainly as it applies to government in this country, it has partisanship very tightly bound up in it. But if you take a step back and you think of it as setting policy, that's the kind of stuff I was doing in my job. I was working with policy, and I was setting policy in the company where I worked, for health and safety. And that was a light bulb moment for me, was, getting involved with policy is not necessarily a bad thing. And certainly bringing information into that policy discussion is a very good thing. Mm-hmm. So, it's, kind of tease those things apart and be careful. And I've learned to be careful when I speak to use the term partisan politics instead of just policy politics.
You find that out when you do a lot of public speaking, and I get in this trap, and it has nothing to do with politics, though. You have in your own head an idea of what you're saying, and then you realize the audience has a completely different idea of what you're saying, even, just using the same word. Yeah. And you have to bridge that gap. You have to put yourself in the audience's frame of reference and say, oh, no, I understand. And I'll tell you that mine relates to compost, and I talk about that on this show. Okay. It's not about politics at all. So when I go into a room and I talk to a group of people and I start talking about compost, and I realize I'm talking about my bin and the active compost and the critters moving around in there, and a truck that brings in 6 cubic yards and dumps it in your driveway, and it's steaming and it's beautiful and rich and it smells great. And then I sometimes have to pull myself up short when somebody says, but what's in a bag at the box store? And I realize, oh my God, that's what they're thinking. Their idea of compost is what's in a bag at the box store. Mm-hmm. And then I have to shift my whole frame of reference and go, oh yeah, okay, all right, well, let's talk about that bag of compost at the store and how that can help you as well. Yeah. And usually that stuff is bupkis, but I'm just saying, because you really want the good stuff, the good compost. And I have then, part of my job is then to try to train them and say, maybe you should move away from that idea of concept or that concept of compost a little towards mine. But I know they're stuck with it because they want something they can throw in the back of a van and take it home. So same thing with politics. Or now you're talking policy and they're thinking partisanship.
Right. And, the other point I'd like to make, because you mentioned this, trying to understand the frame of mind of your audience, the people you're speaking to, and that could be an audience of one, or it could be, we are here right now, being broadcast. And that's something that Citizens Climate Lobby spends a lot of time with the volunteers, is trying to help us understand how to listen how to listen to people we may not agree with, how to understand maybe what their perspective is in the first place, and to see them very much as humans, with experiences and perspectives. And that is where they spend a lot of time, both in terms of monthly support calls or weekly university, it's called Citizens Climate University kind of stuff, weekly training sessions that are optional for people to attend. Is, how do you get out of your own head and open yourself up to hearing somebody else's concerns?
Well, and that's part of the problem when you become an advocate. You so desperately want you to get your point of view across that you forget that other people have points of view as well.
Right. And then, in fact, in June's lobby meeting, we were tasked this time with tracking what percentage of the time the members of Congress, staff, or the actual member spoke in the meeting versus our group, and how many questions were asked.
And what should be the balance?
We were striving for, I believe it was 50-50.
Which would, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would make sense to me. And what were you getting?
I think the preliminary notes seem to suggest probably close to that, plus or minus 10%. However, the final analysis will be done in November. So.
Okay. So here you are, this person who doesn't even like politics. You find yourself somehow attracted to what the Citizens Climate Lobby is doing. You have worked on both sides of the aisle as a liaison in the 10th District to Republicans and to Democrats.
Yes.
That has to be a revelation because most people, I imagine, stick with their side.
It would be the easy thing to do. Fortunately, our district is a swing district, so we don't have anybody who's radically too far in one direction or the other, which made it easy.
I happen to get the notices from Brad Schneider's.
Okay.
So I know something about what's going on in the 10th. I don't even know how I got on his. I know I met him we were speaking together at something, and then one of his staff handed me a card, and I handed a card, and suddenly I'm on the mailing list. That's how that works, yeah.
And I actually ended up very much enjoying working. I've enjoyed working with both the Republican
Who was it before?
Bob Dold.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Both he and his staff were great, and, I can say the same thing about Brad.
Let's talk about, we understand, excuse me, Democratic side, but what about the Republican side? I read an article today, recently, just a few days ago, as a matter of fact, that said the traditional environmental Republican is dead. That person doesn't exist anymore. What would you say to that?
Oh, I would disagree. Dormant, maybe quiet in some cases, but in many respects.
Too quiet, if you ask me, but that's me.
And there's a difference. This is the one thing that I've learned over the 4 years I've been with Citizens Climate Lobby is there's a big difference between political theater and political reality. And a lot of what makes it, into the general social media sphere and whatnot, media is, political theater. But the reality may be very
because
different.
the cameras are always running, the microphones are always on.
Right, and the concerns about being primaried. But what we have heard...
That is the most dangerous thing in the world, as far as I can tell right now, because that pushes you even further into the niches.
Yeah.
And that's not good for democracy.
No, it's not. And that's one of the key things that I come away from the Citizens Climate Lobby work, especially when we go to Washington, is coming away with that deep-seated sense of the way we're working is the way to restore democracy. It's not...
and how is that?
We go in as we are nonpartisan.
Okay.
As one aide to one of the representatives some years ago said, scrupulously nonpartisan. He said it with a certain sense of regret. So unlike some other organizations, we will not endorse political candidates. We want to be able to work freely with whoever wins the office. Individuals more than welcome to go out and campaign for anybody they want to, but put the Citizens Climate Lobby bling away when you do so, kind of stuff. And we go into every meeting with an attitude of respect, appreciation, and gratitude, and it has to be genuine. If you can't do that, you don't go into the meeting. And in fact, there have been a couple cases where I almost backed out of meetings because I was afraid that if I had a speaking role, I would not be nice. And, interestingly, the one that I did that, where I said, don't give me a speaking role, because based on the information that was readily available, I thought that member of Congress was not going to be pleasant to work with at all. And what I didn't know, because it wasn't as readily available, was that member of Congress was a big champion of solar energy in his district. Mm-hmm. And I said, so give me a non-speaking role. I think I took notes or something like that. And it ended up being a very delightful meeting, actually, because then we found, what we work on is we find the common ground and the common values, and we start from there, and then we try to move forward from there. And there are a lot of common values.
Speaking of common values, can I ask a big picture question? I don't know if you can answer it, and that is climate change. What we're told is that Republicans refuse to acknowledge that it even exists. And which is part of the reason we can't move forward on it. The science tells us it's real, it's happening. In fact, we're in dire circumstances right now. How do you address that?
I understand the sentiment. It feels like that sometimes, but I can say for a fact that's nonsense. To categorically condemn a whole part of the whole party. Mm-hmm. They're not a monolith at all. In fact, there are some staunch champions of work on climate change out there. Former Congressman Bob Inglis is out there all the time meeting with conservatives on radio shows, conservative radio shows, kind of like this.
Maybe I should get you to introduce, maybe you should introduce us and I should get him on this show.
Oh, I don't know him personally, but, okay. And we have, people who are both conservative, recognized conservative and progressives on the advisory board for Citizens Climate Lobby, Climate Leadership Council, kind of based out of some work done at University of Chicago, has a lot of conservatives on that. Former Republican Congressman Carlos Curbelo continues to advocate for reasonable climate policy, even now that he's back in private life. There are plenty out there.
Wow, this is sounding so old school here, but it's kind of refreshing to hear this, to hear the way you're describing people at work in our legislative halls. Okay, that is Julie Nowak from the Citizens Climate Lobby. We've got more coming up. We need to discuss the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act when we come back. The Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki.
Want to have a healthier, more eco-friendly Green Diva kitchen? In a Green Diva Minute, you'll learn more and be on your way to living a deeper.
So yeah, we'll get into some of the stuff that that you responded to, and I'm going to give you kudos on the air for your thorough response. I turned it into a Socratic thing on my site with question and answer, so I thought it was great. And we'll play our other Jack Gladstone. Oh, I wanted to hear how this goes.
80% of what Americans throw away.
Repent, you fossil fuel sinner.
Perfect for Sunday.
Right, Sunday thing.
Yeah, well, yeah, we got to bring a little of the organ in. Put your hands on the radio. All right, yeah, about right there. That's perfect. This is great. That's good. That one I'm going to keep. That's a keeper.
Streets Alive
because it's easier to hear what he's saying.
Yeah.
The problem is you hear a lot of these songs and you know the lyrics, but when you hear it the first time, you can't. If you can't understand the lyrics, it's not working. It's not getting the message across.
Oh yeah, conspicuous consumption. I think I finally understood one lyric just this last July when I was driving, and I kept replaying it, and it's just like, oh, that's what he's saying.
Hey, listen, I've got lyrics from my childhood that as an adult you go, oh, that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
Oh, I never had that right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Way too many times.
Like there's a bathroom on the right. Okay.
I don't know what I thought Kodachrome was, but...
Low-level laser, acupuncture, and gentle chiropractic. Visit her at River North Wellness Center and find health tips at rivernorthwellness.com. Call Dr. Bonnie Flaster at 312-642-7545 and get back to feeling good.
Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands on the radio.
Repent. repent, 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 you fossil fuel sinner. Repent, 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 you fossil fuel slave. So park your car, spread the word, kill the news, repent, 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 you fossil fuel sinner.
Oh, I got to thank Julie Nowak for that one, too. Again, that's Jack Gladstone. The album is Native Anthropology. And where did you hear this first?
I heard him play at Glacier National Park in an evening program where they had him performing, and then they combined, some of what he was doing with some slides about the glaciers in the park. And it was actually a signpost event for me in terms of my evolution into being a climate advocate.
There you go. All right, that one I'm saving. Repent, you fossil fuel sinner. All right, we'll get right back to Julie Nowak in a second. City Grange, Chicago's newest and most unique garden center, invites you to What to Plant Now, Parts 1 and 2. Part 1 is seeding fall veggies. Yes, you can still do that. It's this Thursday, August 22nd from 6 to 7 p.m. You'll learn which crops to select, special tricks for fall sowing, and what to expect from your second season garden. Part 2 is landscape anchors, shrubs, and grasses. That's next Saturday, August 24th from 2 to 3 p.m. Time to demystify plant selection and how to make shrubs and grasses work for your garden. Both events are at 5500 Northwestern Avenue at Catalpa. Go to citygrange.com. City Grange, learn, shop, blossom. It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. As you know, if you've been listening to the show today, Peggy is not here today. She'll be back next week. We are talking to Julie Nowak from the Citizens Climate Lobby in Lake County. We need to get to the reason you're here, but I love learning from people about why they do what they do, especially when it comes to volunteering in an area that is difficult. I mean, I'm not making any money doing this. So, when you start advocating for the planet, it's going to be a lot of hours, a lot of hard work, and probably not a lot of reward. And so that's, and I understand that, and that's why I want to give people voice like you and Citizens Climate Lobby. But you're talking about the proposed bill, and I have to thank you. I wrote to you this week about this, and you sent me some, I wrote some questions, and you sent some really terrific answers, and I put them on my website, on the blog. It's sort of the Socratic method at work. Mike asks a question, and Julie responds to it. And folks can read that, but we'll talk about some of them right now because it's about the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, which is also known as H.R. 763, but it still hasn't been passed. It's still wending its way through Congress. And as we mentioned, you're talking about things like a dividend. And as I mentioned at the top of our conversation, I have a hard time wrapping my head around that because I don't see. Well, explain how the dividend would work, and then I'll tell you what I think about that.
Okay. Well, in general, the money for the dividend comes from fees that are placed on the carbon content of fuels.
And let's explain the difference between a carbon fee and a carbon tax right now.
Okay. It kind of feels the same to most people. And it is.
Again, we're thinking of the person in the room.
Yep.
You're on the stage, you're talking, they've got a different idea in their head. They're hearing tax, you're saying fee.
And so in some ways it feels the same, and a lot of times they're used interchangeably. And even in answering your question, I found out that even economists can get really dug into the mud on this one. But the key difference that George Shultz told us was in terms of calling it a fee versus a tax is the purpose of a tax is to raise revenue for the government to do things. And if the government is not keeping these revenues, they're giving them back to American households in equal shares once a month. They're only keeping enough to, write the software and have the people be able to distribute this like they did the stimulus checks. Then it's not really funding anything that the government is doing. So it's more of a fee. So that's why we call it more of a carbon fee rather than a carbon tax. But realistically, people are going to be, seeing things change in price. And
so the idea is we're putting a fee on carbon. If you use too much carbon, there's a fee attached to it.
Well, you're not. So what you don't have to track anything.
No, I'm talking about businesses. I'm sorry. So a business. So if a business is because, you're not being assessed a fee on driving an automobile.
Correct.
Right. It's more about the generation of carbon by larger businesses. Right?
Actually, at the places where the fossil fuels enter the market.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's about 3,000 known entities already that are already in the system for paying other taxes and whatnot, that they would have to pay a fee starting at $15 per ton carbon dioxide equivalent and rising $10 every year thereafter until we get down to what is considered a safe level.
And so this is all collected, and at some point it's distributed to the American public because why? Why should they get this back?
Why should they get this back is we know that the fees are going to be passed on. We don't hide from the idea that the fees are going to get passed on through downstream, So we know we're going to be paying more for the energy to heat our house, the gasoline in our cars, until we shift over to internal combustion engines. But the more interesting thing that I learned through this was that accounts for maybe a third of our total energy. It's all the embedded energy in everything else that we buy. So, but we know that those prices are going to go up. So to help people deal with the transition until we are down to low carbon or better yet renewable energies, they're going to get some money back. They're going to get an equal share back of the revenues. People who are not as wealthy have a lower carbon footprint. They buy less stuff than the people who are wealthy. So for them, they're actually most of them will actually get more money back than they spend in increased costs. If you're living high on the hog, a very rich life, you're going to be spending more money than you're going to get back from the dividend. So there's no means testing involved.
Okay. And by the way, if you want more information, you can go to citizensclimatelobby.org and find out about this. And they actually have a dedicated website that they've created about this, which answers, there's all kinds of questions about this. How many sponsors do you have for this bill?
Well, we are up to 59 sponsors as of August 15th. Before we went into our lobby day in June, it was 41. And it was introduced by a Republican and a Democrat back in January.
All right. And looking at the site, and actually there's another site called energyinnovationact.org, which you can find at citizensclimatelobby.org. They talk about the carbon fee, how the policy puts a fee on fossil fuels, starts low, grows over time. The carbon dividend, money collected from the carbon fee, is allocated in equal shares every month to the American people to spend as they see fit. The border carbon adjustment to protect U.S. manufacturers and jobs. Imported goods will pay a border carbon adjustment. Regulatory adjustment. The policy preserves effective current regulations like auto mileage standards, which are in the process of being gutted right now by the current administration, but pauses the EPA authority to regulate CO2 and equivalent emissions covered by the fee, and it goes on and explains how this works. Some people worry about the government getting involved, but the government has to get involved if you're going to get a fee each month. So isn't that a huge bureaucracy you're putting in place?
It piggybacks on existing systems, so it's not like they're going to have to build a whole bunch of brand new departments or agencies to handle this. This can be done by the existing agencies. Either within, the internal revenue or, they set up a carbon trust fund type thing. So that's why a certain percent, why we say 100% of net revenues, because we know that probably the first couple of years, somewhere between 5 and 10% of the revenues will be needed to get the new system, software system and whatnot established and working. And then, but that number goes down to something below 5% over time of net revenue. So, it's not that it's totally absorbed by existing agencies or departments, but it is very, very small compared to setting up a new regulation and or a whole new agency to deal with.
And this has been tried in other places on the planet. I sent you an article where I found British Columbia actually did it.
Yep.
The conservatives were the ones who pushed it through in British Columbia, and it has worked, except that that's why you talk about border protections. Yep. They need their neighbors to do this, and we're not just talking the United States, we're talking about other provinces in Canada. If they would do the same thing, it would all work a lot better, but they're out there, they're an island out there that has imposed this system, and it has worked, but it can only work to a point because you need to get everybody on board.
Yes, to needing to get more and more on board and having, something that acknowledges, the effect of import and export. However, in Canada, carbon fee and dividend became the default system for Canada to deal with its commitments to reducing emissions. So if a province hadn't already come up with some way of putting a price on carbon, and, it could be through some sort of cap and trade or some other system, the Canadian at the national level said, okay, provinces, you blew us off. You didn't do anything on your own. Guess what? You're doing a carbon fee and dividend now. So Canada actually is in the process of implementing it actively.
Why can't we bring their government down here?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just wondering.
And Ireland is considering it too.
All right.
Yeah.
So people are starting to get on board with this very quickly. We've got like a minute and a half. How does this connect to the new Green Deal? Or the Green New Deal. Sorry, I always get that wrong. The Green New Deal.
Yeah. This is already legislation that exists. It is focused strictly on the reduction of greenhouse gases. The Green New Deal. I do the same thing.
Good. I'm glad there's somebody else has a problem with that.
That is a vision. That's a resolution that sets up kind of like where some people in the United States would like to see us get as a society, which includes reducing our dependence on fossil fuels and greenhouse gases. But it's that's more comprehensive and will require specific pieces of legislation. This is one piece of legislation.
Yeah, I was on Ben Joravsky's show, and he said, "What do you think of the Green New Deal?" I said, "It's just a proposal. I mean, it's as vague as you can be. And you can't pin anything down because there's nothing there yet. It's just an idea."
It's a talk. It starts the discussion.
Yeah. Julie Nowak from the Citizens Climate Lobby. Thank you so much. Go to citizensclimatelobby.org.
What happens when you bring together hundreds of people from diverse faiths
And that's how it works. You can hang around. I'd love to talk to you after the show if you got a second.
Sure.
We'll do Rick DiMaio, and you get to be part of
this important gathering
climate
happens on Saturday,
and weather.
September 14th at the Field Museum in Chicago.
All right. Should we take our headphones off or
No.
leave them on? Oh, okay.
You want to listen to him?
Okay, great. Good idea.
Let's get some music.
If you're looking to
That
invest
won't
in an
get
electrical
zapped
car
by
or truck, make sure to hire a state-licensed electrical
And
contractor. The
by
installation of that charger will require a permit
YouTube
in
as
most
well.
municipalities. So make sure to check the ICC
Someday,
website
when we're out there, I'll tell you, because this is still going through.
You can also call DNR Services Unlimited. They've been a licensed electrical contractor since 1992. Visit their website at restorethenorthshore.com or give them a call at 847-998-1687. It'll be easy to find someone cheaper, but a lot harder to find someone better.
Hi, this is Peggy. McHenry County's largest annual Green Living event is also one of our area's best green events. The 2019 Green Living Expo, November 2nd at McHenry County College in Crystal Lake, attracts hundreds of attendees. We know, we've been there, and it's impressed us for years. So get your business in front of this crowd as a vendor or a sponsor. And yes, green holiday gift ideas are welcome too. Call 815
Get YouTube Music Premium so you don't have to hear this ad or any others again.
Sustainability@mchenry.edu.
Mosquitoes transmit deadly diseases
Yep.
like Zika and West Nile virus, but Summit mosquito dunks kill mosquitoes before they're
Imagine
old
trying
enough
to
to bite.
juggle
Just float an organic
this many
mosquito dunk
inputs.
in ponds, bird baths, and any standing water to kill mosquito larvae for 30 days or longer. Don't worry, mosquito dunks won't harm people, pets, fish, or wildlife. Mosquito dunks, available at fine garden centers, hardware stores, and online. Visit summitresponsibleSolutions.com.
When city crews are changing their schedules, you know that the climate crisis is real. The Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki, Sundays 9 to 11 on 1590 and 95.9.
This is a little CD roulette going on. It's the Mike Nowak Show without Peggy Malecki on this Sunday morning. I can see it's getting a little lighter out there. Maybe it's even stopped raining right now. So let's go to meteorologist Rick DiMaio to find out what the score is. How you doing, Rick?
The score is out of 10, rain nothing. Sun maybe a 1 in another hour, and probably about a 5 in another 2 or 3 hours. So we'll definitely see some sunshine, but the heavy rain I had this morning is pretty much gone. It's pretty good, didn't it, Mike?
It came down pretty good. I was checking my rain gauge, and it was about 1.5 inches when I made my way over to the studio.
Yeah, and not only that, it was 1.5 inches of well-needed rain. I thought it was interesting. When I was actually walking out early this morning with my dog, it was kind of curious to see how the rain was actually literally running off the lawns. It was coming down so fast. And many of the lawns are most likely, obviously we know that they haven't had much rain lately. The ground is so dry that the rain was actually not soaking into the soil, contrary to what we saw back in late April and May when it wasn't soaking into the soil because it was too wet. This time it wasn't soaking into the soil because it was too dry and too hard. A complete reversal of the pattern over the last month and a half.
Yeah, and as you said, we're starting to see some of the lawns dry out. And I will tell people that if your lawn starts to go brown, let it go.
There's no need for it to study.
Well, it goes dormant, and then it comes back when the rains come, and while it's dry, the beetles that lay eggs that turn into grubs will leave your lawn alone. They're looking for someplace moist. And so that's
a good point. That's a great point at that point. Yeah, and I don't know if you noticed, but early in the year we were talking about how bad the mosquitoes were getting, and in the last couple of weeks they weren't that particularly much of a nuisance. Did you notice that as well?
I have not had a serious mosquito. I can't remember being bitten, and so now I got to knock on. I'll hit a ding there, just in case. I'm just going to knock on wood here because I'll walk out today, and because of this rain, or tomorrow, I'm going to get hammered. All right, bye.
Yeah, knock on mosquito netting. Right?
But actually, we did that. I had that at the top of the show for folks listening. That was Monty Python, and I played a little Monty Python about the mosquito hunters, and of course they bring out the heavy artillery. It's pretty funny. I was cruising YouTube and tracked that, and I said, okay, yeah, I can use that for the show.
And is there a difference between an African and a European mosquito, or is that just with the swallows?
There's a lot of different species of mosquito. I'm not the mosquito expert. I could track that down, but there are various.
That's a joke.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were leading me down. Okay, never mind. Oh. And now for something completely different.
Right. You remember when the guy, when he's holding on to the 2 empty heads of coconuts, and he says that a swallow brought them in. And then he asked him which kind of a swallow was an African European. That's where I was going with that.
Oh, okay. See, you know more about. You've got Monty Python burned into your brain better than I do. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No. No, and part of that is because I was at the College of County yesterday because I teach a couple of classes, and you put a bunch of science guys there. Next thing you know, we're talking about Monty Python, but one of the guys who was there, Paul Hamill, is the director, not the director, but the Department of Natural Sciences at McHenry County Community College.
Hey, Rick, I got to stop. Rick, I got to stop you. You're breaking up like crazy. Are you in a particularly bad cell area?
No, how about this? Is that a little bit better?
That sounds better right now if it stays that way. Okay. Where were you?
Yeah, stay that way.
Yeah, stay right there. Don't move.
Okay.
Put the tinfoil hat on. Okay.
I'm not moving.
Okay.
Yeah, I was up at the College of Lake County yesterday because I teach a couple of classes there, and one of the professors in our department up there is Paul Hamill, who's head of the Physical Natural Science Department up at McHenry County Community College. And I was referring to the fact that Peg's PSA just a couple of minutes ago was talking about, I guess, the upcoming sustainability conference that I know is coming up. Yeah. And Paul does a lot of great work, and there's a pretty good chance that maybe not this semester, but probably the semester after, or if not next summer or the following fall, they're finally going to offer a climate change class online, and it looks like I may be teaching that. So one of the great things about teaching that course is I've been getting it ready for my Loyola students is I basically have to rewrite that course like just about every 6 months. If it's not so much dealing with weather, and here we just got new information in that the Arctic sea ice is almost as low as it has ever been since dating back to 1979, or the fact that the month of July just came in as the warmest month ever since we've been basically reevaluating and what you want to call it reanalysis of monthly climate data. This goes all the way back to 1880. And also now the month of July for the state of Alaska just came in as the warmest ever. So again, even though we're not seeing hot and humid weather here in the Midwest, it's been incredibly hot down across the Central Plains and the Southern Plains, and we've been actually in a fairly pleasant pattern now. I think you can agree since about the second or third week of July, it's been fairly pleasant.
Yeah.
Nothing in the way of an extreme heat, nothing in the way of an extreme humidity, and it's almost going to go down. People usually remember the summer on the back end of it. They'll probably go, this summer wasn't too bad. But if you're talking to anybody who needs the entire summer, like farmers, to give a real good gauge about what it's been, what kind of summer it's been another topsy-turvy summer. So again, not so much change, but definitely extreme variability. And that's what we've been seeing not only here in the Midwest, but in North America and also the rest of the world as well.
Yeah, let me ask you a really quick question. Last week you said there was a report coming out on Monday that was going to turn the markets upside down, and we've got Tom Nowak, but apparently that did not happen. So,
I think what happened was the crop report gave more questions than answers. It provided information that showed that we had 11.3 million acres that were not planted. The previous number or the previous record was 3.8, but they're still looking for a fairly good harvest in the areas that was planted. However, the areas that were not planted, obviously they're even at this point beginning to basically churn up or at least dig up those crops. So I still don't think that we have a really good idea of what the overall crop will be until we get to harvest time. And that's really more so when the yield begins to come in. The yield is still going to be lower than what it has been and definitely lower than what the trend has been. But from what I can tell, 4% less corn and 19% less soybeans. And still, those are not good numbers, especially when you add on the confusing tariffs that are going back and forth between us and China.
All right, Tom Nowak, write that down. You got like 30 seconds for a forecast here, Rick.
Yeah, no problem. Weather obviously becoming much more quiet after the thunderstorms that we had this morning. If you're heading down to the Air and Water Show, you should be fine. The rain has passed off to the east. Cold front comes through tomorrow morning. That'll initiate more thunderstorms, but it definitely looks like mid to upper 80s, possible later on today when the sun comes out, but most likely high 80 today, upper 70s tomorrow, and then basically near normal, if not below normal, for the next 6 to 10 days temperature-wise, Mike.
All right, thanks, Rick. We'll talk to you next week. I want to thank everybody on the show today, the Nowaks, Chris Evans, and folks in the Andrew and Ellie. Until next time, go green or go home.
I slept through the whole thing. Well, you didn't miss much.